Rest in peace to the best desktop browser, as the Department of Justice has ruled an absolutely abysmal and ridiculous decision. So let's get into this. And welcome to the This Week in the Tech Boy podcast. So, as some of you may know, the Department of Justice has suggested that Google cannot enter the browser market for another 5 years, nor can they have to separate Google from their browser and sell it off to some company who who's not Google, because I guess Google was too good at search. Also, they want Google search to share some of its proprietary data that caused it to become the number one search engine in the world to competitors for antitrust or for anti-competitive behavior. I mean, this is an absolutely ridiculous decision. First of all, Google does not have its a huge desktop operating system like Microsoft does, and they have Edge on there. And guess what? The number one browser on Windows devices is Edge. Even though Edge kicks and screams and begs you, Edge kicks and screams and begs you not to download Chrome. If you want to go download Chrome on Edge, you go type it in, and Microsoft will say, "Hey, this is the best browser." You go to the download link page. Hey guys, actually, Edge is the best browser, and people still download Chrome. In fact, the Department of Justice is effectively punishing Google and rewarding Edge, punishing Google for being too good and rewarding Edge for being terrible. If Edge was used a lot more, then they would try to break up Edge from Microsoft, because Microsoft sells the most computers and sells the most desktop operating systems and computers. And the reason I use Chrome is because it's the best integrator of Google services in um, Google apps and services. I don't understand why we can't have that. Why can't the first party sell its own, first party tools alongside its browser? And first of all, who would buy this thing? Microsoft couldn't buy this because they have their own browser that's basically based on Chrome, but it's different. Um, Apple wouldn't buy it. People are saying Oracle might buy it, and it's probably gonna die. And I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, think about it. How does this seem fair? Google spends time and money on their own services and their own platforms, and now they have to sell it off because they did too good of a job making their services and platforms, spending their own money and time into this service. They also have special data for their search engine that makes it the best search engine in the world. Right? Some people are saying that Google search engine isn't good, search isn't good, and you're welcome to try the other search engines that are based off of Bing, Yahoo, Bing, Ecosia, whatever. But people keep coming back to Google, not because it's a monopoly, not because it's being forced on users, because it's really easy to change a search engine, it's really easy to try out a different search engine, and it's really easy to use a different browser. In fact, I switched from Edge on my phone to Vivati on my phone, and I'm still using Chrome here. I've tried out other browsers as well, but I keep coming back to Chrome because I like it the best, not because it's been forced on me. I don't even have a Chromebook, which I believe is like 12% of the market share, and most of that is school children or schools that want to have a restricted environment. So that, of course, I'm not going to allow any of the browsers on there as well. It's not Google's fault that they are the best that they're the best browser. It's not Google's fault that they have the best search engine. That's not a monopoly. It would be kind of like separating. Ooh, we already have chat. Let's see. Yes. Anyway, it'd be kind of like separating great value from Walmart. And I was thinking about this. Walmart in the United States, at least, is the number one grocery store in the world. Walmart is the number one grocery store in the world. But as some of you guys may know, Walmart sells other things as well. They have, clothes. They have sometimes a tech section. Sometimes they have a toy section, and they have an automotive section. Walmart could be seen as a monopoly because it's doing so well. They have their own brand, and they do well as a grocery store. So if the DOJ tried something this ridiculous on Walmart and say, hey, you have to break up, right? You can't have your own services integrated with your own software that you that you sell, because ridiculousness. Let's say Walmart was forced to break up by the DOJ, and they had to break off into the main segment. So Walmart could not just be one store anymore. It had to be like 5. So you could have Walmart grocery, which would have to compete with other grocery stores like H-E-B, Kroger, Whole Foods, Aldi, etc., which they probably do pretty well, right? And then you'd have to have Walmart Automotive, which would have to go compete with dedicated automotive stores like O'Reilly and AutoZone. Then you have Walmart Tech, which would have to compete with like Best Buy, Apple, Samsung. Then you have Walmart Toys, which I guess would kind of have to compete with Macy's, Macy's version of Toys R Us, maybe some boutique toy store. And of course, Walmart Clothing, which would have to compete with shopping malls and all the stores that they have there intact. And guys, you know what would happen? Walmart's market valuation would go down because Walmart, is the number one grocery store in the world. And then people also probably go there to buy clothes and things as well. But those subsidize the other businesses that sometimes get people in through the doorway, right? Like the tech business, maybe even the toy business and the automotive business as well. Right? Chrome does not really make money. Google itself makes money by having the integrations and services uh, installed. And if Walmart was forced to break up and forced to share its data with other competitors like Target and like all the other grocery stores, HEB, Kroger, and all these things, like setting relationships and how they get their prices in the spirit of anti-competitiveness and fairness, what you've essentially done here is you've made a success mean that you have to go down and help out all your competitors so that you have a quote-unquote level playing field, even though it's not Google's fault. It's not like they engage in any anti-competitive behavior here. I mean, to be honest, Google should probably engage in more anti-competitive quote unquote behavior here. I mean, yes, their browser is pre-installed on Android phones, but no, it's not pre-installed on any major desktop operating system in the world, and yet it's still chosen. Yes, you can download other browsers and search engines from the Google Play Store if you want to. If you want to download Bing or Copilot, it's really easy to download them in the Play Store, and you can set that as your default search engine application. You can even change your default search engine application inside of the Chrome browser that's in phone. So I don't think Google should have to go out of its own benefit. I mean, it already kind of is, allowing those search engines to be, installed and downloaded and things of that nature. I don't think Google should be forced to have to sell off the Chrome browser, the Chrome brand, because that is why I like Chrome so much, because it has integration with Google services. I don't really need that on my, I guess, personal phone, but I need it for my secure folder version of my phone, and I'll need it for my computer, and that's what makes Chrome great. I mean, it has a simple, easy to use UI. It doesn't have that like ridiculous tabloidy news feed that Edge has. The start page is based on like Microsoft Start or MSNBC or MSN or something like that. It's not as annoying as Firefox is, but oh, guys, privacy. It's not as, I guess, bare bones as Safari. Of course, that's not on. It's not on. Windows and Android, and I'm not going to get a MacBook for Safari. Of course, and then we don't want foreign competitors, of course, buying Google Chrome because millions of users are still going to have Chrome on their phones, on their PC, right? They're not going to switch. I mean, think about it. There's millions of users who still use Windows 7, Windows 10, right? Lots of government computers that use Windows XP. So it's going to be a hard switch to get people to switch away from Chrome to some other browser that's not as good, that looks different, and things of that nature, and then they get an update. And let's say some Chinese company like Tencent or something were to buy it, and they switch and swap hands, and then, well, you have a backdoor into, millions of users instead of it being a Google computer, all because of the interest of anti-competitiveness and antitrust. When honestly, the thing that can breed and foster competition, and we're seeing lots of competition right now in the AI wars. I mean, Google's not necessarily winning there. I mean, Google's Gemini can't even generate people yet since February because it had some issues with that. So some people are switching over to ChatGPT and Copilot, and we have these different wars here. But look, guys, Google has won the search engine war. They didn't win it by buying out competitors. They didn't win it by force installing it on millions of devices around the world and making it hard to switch away. They did it by having the best search results and the fastest search results. I mean, Microsoft and Edge and Bing should be mad at themselves for not being the number one dominant search engine in the world. I mean, they had about 88% of the market share, and your browser is basically pre-installed here, and yet people still chose Chrome. It would be like driving. Let's say you have a local store next to you, grocery store next to you, and yet you still decide to drive all the way. In fact, use that store, and you start to drive all the way out there so you can go to Walmart. because of brand loyalty. And people are choosing Chrome out in droves, not because they're being forced to, but because they want to. And I don't think it should be the government's right to choose what browser you use away. Because, I'm not using Chrome just because I like the UI. I like it because of the Google integration. I like it because of the Google features. And I trust Google and I trust it with my security. I'm not sure if I trust any other random company as well. And, some of the big companies like Apple and Microsoft already have their own browsers. It's going to get kind of weird if a company has two different browsers. Hey guys, use Edge, but you guys can also use Chrome if you want on the site. They might kill the Chrome project, which would be really really bad because I don't really like Edge that much. And of course, Google wouldn't have their own browser. The number one search engine in the world wouldn't have their own browser. But I guess you'll let Microsoft have their own browser. That doesn't make sense. That honestly doesn't make sense. And like, it's not like Chrome is a closed source browser. No, it's based off the Chromium project, which other browsers are based off of. Edge is the new Edge is based off of Chromium. Vivati and Opera is based off the Chromium project. So you can get a browser that kind of looks like Chrome. It's called Chromium. This won't have as much Google integration as you like. And I like the Google integration. Now you could say that this could force Google to integrate across the other browsers as well. But first of all, that's a lot of browsers they have to um, integrate for. Second of all, it's not like the integration doesn't work. I mean, you can still sign in to your Google account and get your Gmail and stuff like that. But it doesn't feel the same. And I don't think that they should be playing these browser wars with them. But yeah, DOJ, please drop the case. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous and asinine decision over there from the DOJ. It's kind of like that article I wrote about how the the Department of Justice basically forcing a married couple to break up with each other because sorry bug break up with each other so that I guess you'd have to marry other people because it's anti-competitive to the dating market. It doesn't really make that much sense, right? So it's absolutely ridiculous. I guess we can get into that. So robots revolted in a Chinese factory. From a competitor. I guess they're a artificial intelligence robot. So come on, I gotta find the I gotta find the article. All right, well, as I'm finding the article here, what do you guys think about the DOJ decision to potentially break up Google and destroy, Android as we know it? I mean, that's gotta be annoying. I mean, it could destroy Android as we know it. It could destroy Chrome as we know it. And speaking of backdoors, a I cannot find the Chinese factory robot revolution. Oh, found it. Anyway, have not installed backdoors, but used necessary backdoors for security, of course, that were embedded in the United States telecommunications network. Of course, these were there for security and safety, and they should be there, in my opinion. But Chinese hackers got their way into it, so that's just a news article update there for you guys. So just be on the lookout for that. Hopefully they can get the hackers out. But speaking of Chinese hackers, hopefully you guys can see this article on the screen. Let's see, I'm going to share the screen. A Chinese robot has persuaded multiple robots to there we go. Persuaded multiple robots, dozens, according to this article, to walk out on their jobs. And these robots here, and this robot here is a competitor, and he talks to them. It's in Chinese, so I guess you guys, the audio doesn't really make sense unless you understand Chinese. So it's just gonna be, but he's gonna talk to them. It's a competitive robot, which is absolutely ridiculous. They let a competitive robot into the robot facility. And then he's gonna walk into here, and he says, "Are you working overtime?" to the small robots. And as you can see on the screen, he leads all these robots out of the door. He says, he tells the robots to come home with him, and they follow him out of the building, and they leave. So be on the lookout for robots like that are deciding to quit. I guess it's better than the robot vacuums that were hacked and running around your house, and screeching slews. All right, the interesting story for today. Of course, we have to talk about. I should have noted some of these things down. I only have 2 things in my notes today, which isn't good because I had so much to talk about today. I should have noted them down, but it's a 1 hour podcast, so let's go over to my website here. I honestly think that innovation in the technological space might be decaying or dying quickly, and that's not a good thing. Of course, it's going to even slow innovation. It's going to slow even more if the DOJ and governmental bodies around the world, like the EU, thinks they can decide to legislate what type of ports your phone decides to use and things of that nature. If they try to legislate all of these things like AI legislation and the type of browsers that you want to use legislation, and Google integration legislation, it's going to slow the technological progress even more if you have all these copious amounts of laws and regulations that you have to abide by or within the technological space. So hope you guys can see this on the screen. But technological innovation, even without these burdens, might be coming to an end. Like let's talk about your cell phone here. Right, cell phones and computers have exploded in popularity year over year. Like more people have smartphones than ever before, and what is considered a dumb phone now would probably be considered a smartphone way back in 2007. Smartphones and computers, of course, these home computers have been around since like the late 70s and early 80s, and smartphones came in the early 90s, but they didn't really gain popularity until the 2000s. But innovation in the smartphone sector might be dead. Like I always like to state, the iPhone 6s is like one of the pinnacle, key important iPhones, of course, in terms of popularity. And when we get into the mid 2000s, apps are the big new thing. Just like computer software was the big thing in the 80s and the 90s for the computers, and this was initially a good thing. It did take down BlackBerry, unfortunately for them, and Windows phones, and now we're at Android and iOS, right? But apps are the new thing. If you didn't have apps, you didn't innovate fast enough, and of course you didn't have a touchscreen which people really liked, then your phone company and your phone's entire OS would be eliminated. So in this period of time, of course, we saw BlackBerry OS, Symbian OS, and Windows Phone all go away, as well as flip phones and dumb phones also go away, and now we have smartphones, right? And then the phone companies have to decide what they're going to do now, right? You have enough apps, probably for what you need, and things of that nature. But remember, back then in like 2008, 2009, once you get the basics were not good. The basics were not that good. Browsers, like an increase in browser performance, as we'll see in the video. Now, over time, back then, back like in the 2008, 2010, right? If you see a few videos, you talk about browser performance. That was a very important thing. Also, and maybe the DOJ wants to listen to this, but you couldn't really change the browser that was built in on your phone. It was just set there. Or on my phone now, you have like hundreds of browsers that you can choose from. Now, of course, only a few of them are actually good, but you just have hundreds of browsers that you can choose from if you want to, as well as search engines. But back then, the browser was built in to change it. So when you had got it, the browser performance did improve. It did get better, and of course, messaging applications, they also did get better. Calling, calling applications had to go from pretty decent because we had the keypad, and then they probably got bad because they touching. But once you finally got that down, that's good. Now you have your calling, your messaging, your browser, and your few utilities. So like a notes application, your camera application, your gallery application. Once you get all that down, you're not going to need a third party application for that. Once you get all that down, and once you get everything set, what is their next innovate? Well, there's not much that the phone companies themselves can do, but you can have these third-party apps. And of course, there weren't that many apps back then, so you'd see more apps coming over and over and over in at the time. But how the phone companies were supposed to innovate is uh, specs. You can see massive year over year, or maybe 2 year over year improvements over time. Like if you do a jump from, say, the Samsung Galaxy S1 to the Samsung Galaxy S3 and S4, the camera performance would be improved. Of course, the battery in the S1 was like 1,500 milliamp hours. So when you switch over to, say, a Galaxy S7 Edge, in only a span of a few years, you have an expanded screen, you have a curved edge screen, you have a 2.5 time, no, yeah, about 2.5 to 2.1 times bigger battery. These are huge specs from an upgrade perspective, right? And of course, these features that are included, people would upgrade and buy their phones for these brand new niche features like fingerprint scanning. Hey guys, look, the operating system Android 4.4. I was really excited for this when Android 4.4 came out, but when Android 5 particularly moved from my tablet, face recognition technology came to the device. Optical zoom cameras, it was really big back in 2018, 2019 with the Samsung Galaxy S8, Note 8 and S9 Plus series of devices, getting optical zoom cameras, the whole edge-to-edge display. Of course, they got USB-C, right? But now, specs, they don't really mean anything as much, right? These year-over-year upgrades, they had something that was tangible. The camera performance got better, or even doubled as, you went from one camera to two cameras to three cameras, right? But now specs have gotten so good, but the application development hasn't kept up, which means innovation might be dying because there's no reason that you need to have more specs, right? 5,000 milliamp hours has been the decided choice for batteries, at least in the Android world, on S24 Ultra, and from every Ultra S20 to the S24 Ultra now has had a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, and it's been pretty decent across the board. Now, maybe for some units like mine, maybe the battery won't be as good, and the camera performance, right? It's been good. You can see some improvements in terms of zoom and things of that nature if you're like professional or videography or things like that. But most people, because of the lack of an app situation, are using Snapchat, Instagram, Pinterest, multiple photo sharing applications, which then compress them, which means essentially, unless you're taking Zoom pictures or video, and people don't know how to take good videos anymore, like the stabilization is really bad, the vertical video quality is really bad. So unless you're using, I guess, YouTube, but for most social media platforms, which YouTube is not, but for other social media platforms like Instagram and Pinterest, right, it's going to compress it, which means essentially that unless you're performing some type of OSINT or like surveillance or detective work on the pictures, you're not going to notice the difference between, say, an iPhone 6S or an iPhone 13 or an iPhone 16 or a Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Of course, this is exempting the zoomed in images. This is just like taking one-on-one cropped images, especially since most of those things are going to, of course, get compressed and they're going to go through filters. So it doesn't really matter what kind of camera you have on there, as long as it's not really bad, like the kitty zoom camera, right? And of course, you cannot just upgrade just for the specs. Of course, cell phones are going to stay around. Like laptops have been around since the 80s, and they have literally not changed in terms of form factor or in terms of in terms of form factor. Literally, it's like a screen and a keyboard, right? Now, how you configure the keyboard has basically been the same, and the screen has gotten so that when the first laptop came out, it was more bezel than screen. Now it's more screen than bezel, and of course, you did some improvements here, like you have a touch screen. Maybe you can do some improvements like, oh, this has a better touchpad, has a better keyboard as well. But when you look at like MacBooks and things of that nature, like I said, most kids have a MacBook. In some article, right? In one of like the hot take articles. Like when you look at the work that they're doing on the MacBooks, it's that computers, right? And this is also the same thing that for the sad thing that's happening in innovation in the computer space, is that computers are basically being used as big screen, phones. Like, some people are like, oh, I can't I'll do this at home when I get onto my computer, and I'll use the link, and I want to use my browser to see a big screen or anything like that. But Microsoft and the Windows operating system was created long before the World Wide Web, internet, publicly accessible internet was really a thing. Like it was created at a time when the internet was basically a command line interface. Um, not really command line, but like just text, not really graphics. So browsers didn't really exist at a time of that nature. So when people are using these links on like Windows and things of that nature, Mac OS, Chrome OS doesn't really count because Chrome OS is built from the ground up around a web browser. Which how would a ruling affect Chrome OS? Hey guys, this is the Chromebook by Google, but you guys, you can choose what browser you want. It doesn't seem fair, but whatever. Um, anyway, back to the computers, right? What they're basically doing is just using a website, and they want the big screen, which Windows wasn't just designed just to being, hey guys, browser with the screen attached to it, big screen attached. So that's basically what a Chromebook is for. Um, but it seems that people have gotten content with that. Microsoft, they're gonna be fine with that, right? People still are going to pay hundreds of dollars for computers that literally just display information or show a browser, even though like your phone can do it, just that you don't think the screen's big enough, which I don't really. Of course, if you have like a good phone that has a stylus, which you can have a Samsung S24 Ultra or any of the older Ultras, which would be cheaper at least on eBay. Or you guys can get the Motorola Stylo and Stylo 5G series, which also has a stylus. It looks like a piece of foil, but it does have a stylus. I played with it before. And you can use the web that way. Like with large budget cell phones or 6.6, 6.7 inches of screen real estate. And they're even bigger to hold because the bezels, of course, on flagship smartphones like Samsung Galaxy's S series of phones are smaller than the bezels over on the budget and mid-range series of devices. So honestly, it doesn't really make sense that people are just using computers to display information, especially like the CrowdStrike outage. We learned that all those computers that were showing flight information or even terminals, or that just kind of like showed ads and maybe those like mall maps, which I think could probably be done on a power efficient SoC specialized operating system, were often used by Windows machines, right? It seems like that most people don't really use Windows for its intended purpose. But the problem is, I think it's with search. App discovery over on Android is awful. It's really awful. Like, you'll find some of the most admirable applications, but also, like we've gone through multiple times, all the applications that are over on Android, the top 50 on the top chart is 95% web portals to clients. Like we're talking about TikTok and Instagram. Those are essentially like they do not work with the internet. Apparently, Snapchat does, kind of. Not the chatting features, but the filters and the games, which are not that good of games. When we look at the specs that you have on your phone, right? What we have here now is a phone that is more powerful than most laptops from 12 gigabytes of RAM. Of course, you can't really compare the chips with whatever chip it was unless we go up against it. But yes, the chips are more power efficient too. Of course, better. Well, a better screen than the laptops that came before it. And yet, we hear all about this desktop software that you cannot find. And also for the games on Android are abysmal. Either terrible quality graphics loaded with ads. Of course, you can find some, but you have to kind of like go in search, go use Reddit and things like of that nature instead of using Google's own search, Google's own Play Store in there too. We've gone through this multiple times. About 95% of the applications, this isn't hyperbole. I think it's like 45 out of 50, which I think is 95%. 90%, 45 out of 50, might have been 47 too. You can go back and check podcast screen when we were counting all the applicants. Applications do need web access. And for the games, I mean, when you look at the sponsored suggestions at the top chart, you have that game that they show on YouTube that's just the people running and doing things running around. So what we essentially have here is an overpriced not overpriced, but overpowered device with things that are just for scrolling of nature and you're not really doing anything productive. When I look over to the computer side of things as well, you can't even find good computer software that's offline. That's why you have to go back in time, and I mean literally back in time, by going up and going to Google Books or something, or the Internet Archive if it's up, and going back to the 90s and reading all the computer magazines that they had out there, because of course internet speeds weren't going to be good enough to run full scale applications, which doesn't really make sense why all these people need to have like Windows and Mac computers if they're just going to run web applications when you can honestly, and this should come up, this should be coming to more phones, but it should come to more phones, including iPhones. Just have plugins that you plug in a desktop mode if you're just going to use the web. If you're just going to use the web, applications and clients and things of that nature. Like Canva is one of the biggest apps in the Play Store. Like, I'm just going to go here and go top charts, and to scroll down in top charts for applications. I'm going to scroll, and the number 14 application is Walmart. Like, most of these applications are just either streaming applications or social media applications, and that's it. Also, like the number 53 application is a QR code and barcode scan, of which, of course, you do not need a QR code and barcode scan on your phone. At worst, at best, it's taking up space that you don't need. And at worst, it's a spyware application. Just use Google Lens. So make sure you guys use Google Lens. All right, let's get into this video. I think you guys are going to see what I'm talking about. So Mr. Stabas went through almost every iPad ever, and then we'll talk about some movies that may disrupt, SSA LTW hierarchy. Maybe, probably not, because I'm always right. Speaking of always being right, just kidding. People over here, I bring up something and then they'll go attack Ava. We will defend Ava today. Anyway, I bought every iPad ever, almost every, because he doesn't get the iPad 2017, and then and he just goes to the pros, so he doesn't really talk about the A's. Which, if Apple wasn't so stingy with their storage slicings, might be the best iPads. Like if I had to get an Apple product, I'd get an iPad. Though I like Samsung tablets too. It just doesn't really make sense for me to have a Samsung tablet. I mean, I have a laptop, it, flips, so I don't need a tablet. And my phone would do literally everything, the same thing that the tablet does, except for read micro SD cards, because unfortunately Samsung took that away. Be sure to sign the remember the slot petition. Anyway, every iPad ever.
Have you ever tried to visit a website only to have like 90% of it taken up by ads? Pi.org is a web browser extension that lets you decide.
Wait, why am I hearing that? What's wrong with these headphones? Wait, can you guys still hear? It'd be really sad if you guys couldn't hear what I was saying. Nope. Okay, good. You are getting something through. What's it coming through? The phone speakers? Well, not phone speakers, but oh, it's coming through here. Oh man, this must sound terrible to you guys. Oh well, I'm gonna see if I can reconnect the Bluetooth headphones. All right, here we go. All right, they're on and connected. These headphones have really good battery too. Like they can survive like 2 days. Unfortunately, of course, there's no case and they can't be used while charging, which is really weird because they basically turn into wired headphones. If you have your USB-C to USB-C charger, plug it in. Oh wait, it's not connected. Uh-oh. All right, good. We're connected. Now I want the audio to go to the speakers so it doesn't get distorted from through the headphones, so it doesn't get distorted by the microphone. So let's go into the settings here. Audio. All right, let's see. It's not showing up in the software. So I guess hopefully there's no feedback. Anyway, I bought every iPad ever. Oh, you can't see this on the screen. Skip through the ads.
I just bought every generation.
I also heard someone whining that Google Chrome doesn't allow ad blocking, which is a blatant lie. I mean, I know you guys hate Google, Redditors, but you don't have to lie. I mean, half of Reddit is lies. I do contribute to that account. That's how I got featured on NTV. So, We did it. Anyway, uh, still no speakers here. Oh well. Here we go.
Generation of iPad ever. So let's find out how the iPad was originally scrapped, how Apple eventually made it, but then completely ruined the marketing of it, and then how they finally got it all together and crushed the competition.
And what you'll see here is that you'll see mostly year-over-year upgrades. And then, you're going to hear lots of new specs that come in, but they're absolutely useless. Now, there are some more applications over on the iOS side, a few, like the Adobe Creative Suite. I think the competitor, Affinity, I believe. Sorry. Affinity also is on the iPad. I think LumaFusion is better on the iPad. Might be, might not be, but I haven't used it. But I think, yeah, like better as in it allows you to use plugins. They don't allow plugins on the Android version of LumaFusion, which is kind of sad. But not like supercomputery applications. Like yeah, you have some of those applications that people use, like the creative applications, but like the super nerdy computery, like kind of 80s and 90s, hey guys, let's discover what the computer can do, type of application. Those aren't really on there. Or like you hear, oh, we use a computer to simulate all these events. Oh, we use a computer to do this, display this. So you have like all the computers in Spy and season have those like, good programs. Speaking of, we'll go through some movie reviews and um, tap those off, and of course, like you have all this power. Like yes, I saw a kid like on a phone call, right, and like drawing something on a tablet, which in like a 2004 spy movie would be like the greatest technology of all time. But it seems like that either the consumer appetite isn't there to have good applications and have these advanced programs, or the programs just aren't there themselves and not fully utilizing the power of the device. And people are like, oh, well, it talks about efficiency. Oh, well, it's helped with the processing and, some limited, very limited on device AI. But I think we really need to push through the full potential of the devices. Also, we need to learn how more things, work, especially like the NWS, National Weather Service, satellites, radar, things like that. Like if you try to look up how satellites are able to take pictures, you don't really get and transmit pictures by radio. You don't really get good answers. Sometimes you kind of get. I kind of figured out it's kind of like how you can transmit pictures via sound with the SDR. Maybe it's kind of like that with the radio. But you don't really get answers like that. You don't really they don't really tell me what kind of software that they're using. So when people say, oh, we use a computer for this, or use a computer for modeling, we use a computer to have these great graphics and spy technology. You don't really hear how it's done. You just know that it is possible. Like, I'm sure you want to keep some of the software, classified, but at least tell some of us how it works. So we're not just stuck here using, basically useless like Paint, Copilot, and Chrome or whatever. It's just really sad. Anyway, back to the.
Now, you know what's actually crazy about the first iPad? That this was being worked on all the way back in 2004, and it's only.
Which would have been interesting to see it get released in, say, I don't know, 2006 or something. Because, of course, the infrastructure, the applications wouldn't have been there yet. Tablets did kind of exist, but you'd be like, what is this for? What do I need this for? I guess maybe they called it a digital notebook, digital newspaper.
While Apple down this same tech, it could become an absolutely. And as soon as they realized that, they immediately would end up becoming the iPhone in 2007. So if you think.
I wonder how do you think the world would have changed if that got released in 2007?
Think about it, this is actually the product that Apple originally intended to make, but it took till 2000. So underneath the iPad is an insert with a full-color quick start, manuals, and 2 Apple stickers. Can't even get one of those now.
Yeah, so it's gonna unbox it, whatever. The specifications and the price here. Keeping in mind that it is 2010.
Hell, Steve Jobs fully knew that when he announced that the thing was not going to be $999, but in fact, $499. Listen to that reaction.
I wonder if they made those presentations in Keynote. Also, we never really hear how those like animation and things kind of like happen. Like it's kind of like the nitty gritty of computer science is not really, explained pretty well on websites, which is another thing. Like, there's so many websites. Sorry, on the internet, right? But it seems like people have kind of moved away from websites for fun, and they've moved more towards social media platforms, which is kind of sad.
Wow. And 2, that the way you could interact with the thing was revolutionary. Like I said, practically every tablet at the time had a stylus to mimic the mouse pointer. Since
I mean, look at this thing. And yes, it's made by Samsung. And it's probably can run more applications than like I said, your phone is more powerful than whatever the heck this is. But it's gonna run more applications than what your phone can. So if it was me designing this thing, I'd move the keyboard to the bottom. Just pro tip to Samsung. Though I do like that it does look like it has a fingerprint scanner. So good on them.
since they were all just
The scanner's here, I think.
Windows computers, and so when Steve Jobs announced that they managed to scale up the iPhone's capacitive multi-touch interface to work on their tablet, and that all you needed was a finger, I mean, he probably could have just dropped the mic and walked off at that moment. No more things. This was such a new concept that, even though it seems so obvious now, Jobs actually needed to show people how to navigate this thing. Not to mention, this was the first time you could just rotate
We got the Holy Bible.
on iOS and switch over to landscape mode.
So right.
And using this thing takes me back so much. I remember this being such a desirable gadget. And it's also a sign.
I wonder for what though? Like back in 2010. Like yeah, maybe some games. I guess maybe it's like a games console. Like movies?
How much care they put into the user interface that it still holds up today. I would actually go as far as to say that it is still beautiful. And even though
Yeah, it's probably because of the skeuomorphism in the design.
the thing is not light, just by being light enough that you can hold it in one hand, intuitive to use and powerful, with the Apple A4 chip making it 3.4 times more powerful than the first iPhone, Apple very quickly put tablets back on people's radars. The iPad sold
And of course, you would need that to be about 3 times more powerful because it's 3 times bigger, so it has 3 times more output. Of course, if you want the same pixels per inch as the iPhone, you'd have to have, you know, a more powerful GPU. So you can see actionable upgrades over here on the iPads as we're seeing over time. But
over 15 million units in total before it was replaced, in large part by replacing the
this is the iPad 2, by the way.
original iPad's 2 fatter batteries with 3 flatter batteries, which also allow them to remove some of the internal plastics.
Oh, and notice the upgrades that you see here. The cameras, dual cameras, which were not present on the iPad.
Port framing. It was the first iPad with cameras, a front 0.3 megapixel and a back 0.7 megapixel.
Couldn't even make it 1, but still, it does have cameras.
And Apple celebrated that with the launch of Photo Booth on iOS, which no one was using as their main camera, but there was definitely something fun about the fusion of the camera with the
This reminds me of that thing that they have on the Macs. It also reminds me of like some movie, like all the kids come over and they come together and they're like, hey guys, you have a Mac, and hey guys, and they take pictures. Maybe that's like something in my brain. It sounds like something that's 2010, 2013-esque. I think Brett Cooper was kind of like, hey, we did this for fun, but now kids are doing this for money, and that's not a good thing. That's stupid. Let's see. Is it called Photo Booth on Mac? Let's see. Maybe they replaced it because Snapchat exists now. Oh yeah, Photo Booth on Mac. That's a thing. I wonder if we can test it out.
The iPad's fun, bite-sized software. Oh my goodness me. I remember this feeling like people's first taste at what you now get with the practically unlimited Snapchat filters. To think there must have been a point where all of these Apple execs were sitting in a boardroom testing these features.
Maybe they brought their kid in.
God. iPad 2 had double the RAM at 512 megabytes, and the new dual-core A5 chip ended up making this about 2.5
And that's a huge leap in performance as well. And of course, applications and games, they needed this kind of things, that kind of performance back then. But now, like, the games we have in the Play Store, pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Watch the video. I'm going to pull it up on my screen.
times faster than the original iPad. So let me try and load up the same web page on both. This was like the classic comparison. Everyone wanted to see it.
Oh yeah, see, like I was saying, the web browser was a huge pivotal moment, right, in phones. And of course in tablets. The tablets weren't really a big thing, a huge thing, other than the iPad. But they were a big thing in the tablets. But let's look at the software. Come on. No.
At the time.
Oh.
Let's go Samsung.com. 3, 2, 1, go. What? Safari cannot open the page because it could not establish a secure connection to the server. What are they trying to say about Samsung? Apple.com, 3, 2, 1, go. Oh. Well, the iPad 2 has already started to load the page. iPad 1 is still going. There you go.
And you see how much better browser upgrade could have been in day-to-day use, but not because you know, you can see how the specs, directly contributed. But now it's just like, oh, guys, you have a nice little spec. My phone's better than your phone, but they all run the same, like 6 apps in the same way.
Although neither can actually load the full page. Not to mention, this is where Apple introduced smart covers, automatically putting the iPad in sleep mode when closed while cleaning the screen with their microfiber cloth backing. This doesn't normally happen with sequel products, but the iPad 2 was such a huge leap that this specifically became an icon, even more so than the original, so much so that this was still being sold up until 2014 as the entry-level iPad, even outlasting the 3 and the 4. But it's with this third iPad that things start to get a little strange. See, logic would dictate that if your iPad sold well, your iPad 2 sold gangbusters, that all you have to do is to keep making the same kinds of improvements and to call it the iPad 3. What Apple actually did was call this new iPad the new iPad.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, first of all, it's going to be hard to find that on the internet today because if you search in the new iPad, Google will rightfully show you the newest iPad that Apple has released. But, I mean, Apple, which is claimed it's the best, best at marketing. People study them for marketing. Their logo, it's worth a lot of money in terms of like market value. Like it's desirable. It's even on those basic, what they're called, starter packs. You got your Apple logo, your Hydro Flask, your Lululemon leggings, like it's on those starter packs. Anyway, like it's worth something, but Apple kind of like screwed up on marketing here. Come on.
What? This will never make sense to me. How can any product ever be named the new something? Because what do they think happens when it's not new anymore? Hey, I'm here to repair my new iPad. Oh, you got the new iPad? Yeah. Well, I mean, I got it like 3 years ago. You got the new iPad 3 years ago. Yep. Are you sure it's not the new old iPad? Well, it's not, the new iPad, but it is the new iPad, if you get me. I'm not paid enough for this.
Driving the Nissan Rogue with Google built in is like...
Hey Google,
Nissan stream.
turn on Rocky's food.
We'll take their money gladly.
The key new thing this time was after Apple saw the reaction to the Retina display on their iPhone 4, they knew that they had to bring that tech to the iPads too. And it was an especially massive jump here because there was...
Right, of course, the upgrade in display technology. Right, sure, you might get a QHD display on, of the phones, but it's not that interesting.
There's already a lot of pixels to start with.
Of course, you're Apple. If Apple switches to iPhone 17, 120 or even 90 plays, those are going to be important upgrades because, they've been stuck at 60 hertz for years. Not the pro versions, but, the regular versions that most people use.
This brought the iPad up to one of the highest resolution displays on the market, full stop. I mean, just look at the difference in the...
Yeah, look at the change here. Now, you can actually see the that are in the iPad 2 over than against the new iPad. Also, I wonder how much, in the skeuomorphism, like, you have like kind of a 3D-esque bar that it's sitting on, took up over, say, the new flat design on iOS 7 that's continued to this day. Speaking of, I went through and opened up my phone and looked through the top charts of the apps that we have here. Number 4 on the list is Block Blast, which is rip off. Interesting plane. Forgot what it's called. Rip off Tetris. And then we have some new games came out: Capybara Go, Sprinky Magic Music Beatbox. What the heck? And Roblox. But most of these games here are either really, really simple games. Whole.io. find the different. Eat the, yeah. Whole IO is basically a sinkhole that eats buildings. Color sorting game, nut sort, which you sort bolts and nuts. Uh, Snake Clash, which is Snake. Such bad quality games. I mean, compared to what you get on, say, a console, or even like, I mean, yes, the PS5 is more powerful than that, but I mean, you're telling me that you couldn't create a halfway decent. I've looked into it. There's no good decent halfway decent version of Rocket League for a phone, or like that game where you run around with paint and shoot at people. That's on the Switch, which is like Aaron said, Mr. Boss said last episode, like a fourth the power of a phone. You couldn't find that. You could make a halfway decent version of that for mobile. You guys to go try to find a good version of that card game. What's it called? Rocket League, or that paintball splash game that they have on the Switch on mobile. Put them in the comments below. There won't be any comments because you won't find a good version of it.
Safari icon. This kind of clarity would have felt surreal in 2012. So that part of it was great. It's just basically the rest of it. Like the A5 chip in the iPad 2 became the A5X in the iPad 3, which was frankly a tiny improvement. This iPad had the same amount of storage, the same 30-pin connector. I mean, it looks identical. It was the first iPad technically with support for LTE networks, but even that was a problem. Despite advertising the iPad 3 as a 4G LTE device, it actually couldn't communicate with LTE networks outside of the US due to the use of different radio frequencies.
They should have just said in US only, like they do for the AI.
Which led to Apple being sued across multiple countries. And at the same time, while Apple was starting to get comfortable, the Android competition was starting to heat up. Up until this
You
point,
see that, guys? Competition happened without the DOJ saying that Apple needed to share its data. They needed to share its data with all the little Android tablet manufacturers in the world for a more fair and equitable world.
yes, there had been plenty of Android tablets, but they were awfully optimized. They were so buggy and laggy that they'd actually created a bad reputation for Android tablets as just the knockoff alternative to iPad. But Google was paying very close attention to the surprising take-up of the iPad, and they invested very heavily around this time in creating a tablet-optimized version of
Honeycomb.
Android. Android 3.0, Honeycomb. Man, it feels so good to talk about this again. These Honeycomb tablets were actually something I was covering in the very early days of this channel, and they were great. You could find something at every price point. They were way more customizable than Apple, and since
Yeah, games like now they don't take that much power, but back then, they did take some power.
they were now running a software that was specifically designed for tablets, they actually used the large available screen space better. Plus, by the time Android 4.0 rolled out, Google was also starting to fix the single main thing holding Android back: the lag, which all put together meant that Apple's market share was tumbling fast, all the way from 85% the year of the first iPad to 44% now. And I think seeing all of this happen, Apple started to get a little bitter. They felt like they were the ones who started this whole smartphone and smart tablet thing, and everyone else was
Which they didn't start the smartphone. You could say they started the smart tablet, but tablets did already exist. It's just they're supposed to be a successful one.
just copying them, particularly Samsung. So it's at this point that Apple decided to try and sue them. They claimed that Samsung copied everything from the design to the screen icons and even
I'm not really sure how you copy that design. I mean, it's a square. That's the design that tablets are supposed to be. This isn't iCarling. You're not gonna make your tablets look like pears, or all phones for that matter. Like, it's the design that that they're supposed to be. It's like the design of a shoe, or at least the sole of a shoe. Like, sure, you can go up higher, like if you have boots or high heels, but the sole of a shoe or even a hat is going to be exactly the same. You can't really patent that. Like, your phone is going to be vertical because that's what your phone's supposed to be. When people try to make phones the way they're not supposed to be, like LG, then they go out of business.
even core patented features like tap to zoom and bounce back, which allows your screen to show the surface beneath a document. The funny part of this, though, is that failed because the High Court ruled that there was no way.
Here we go. Finally, a decent court ruling. Might not be from the DOJ, but it was a good court ruling. So, have to respect them back then.
Any consumer would ever confuse the two devices because Samsung was, and I quote, not as cool.
Yeah, I don't know how, like, what, but I'll take the win. I'll take the win.
So, I mean, no one really wins here. But this and
I mean, I guess by law, Samsung's not as cool, according to this ruling.
ended up being just the beginning of what would become the absolutely brutal 7 years.
See, even here we have the iPhone 6 and 6S, which was an iconic phone even 10 years later. And think about it, 10 years later. And let's go back. This is a phone from 10 years ago. I think it's the iPhone 6. Got YouTube, you got your camera, you got your social media applications, you got everything here. It's the same applications. We haven't seen anything new. I guess the iPhone has just finally got to this size. But that's it.
Suing and countersuing conquest between these two companies.
Also,
and the
nobody
waters
cares about those guys.
only got muddier later that same year. Because it wasn't just full-size Android tablets that were starting to become popular. It was smaller 7-inch ones too. Because remember, most phone screens at this time were still only like 4 inches.
Wait. Oh yeah, there's the Holy Bible right there. And we got Google goggles. Even hey guys, look, Firefox and Opera, and Chrome. It looks like these people are able to even their own basic Android browser. These people are able to download their own browser without, needing help from someone. How nice of them.
7-inch ones too. Because remember, most phone screens at this time were still only like 4 inches. Now, Steve Jobs had historically hated this idea. He believed that users needed the iPad's larger 9.7-inch screen to actually do anything useful. But there was another Apple exec, Eddie Q, who had been pushing for a 7-inch iPad since 2011 through internal emails. And eventually, he won Jobs over. I think it's so fascinating to see how Apple was thinking at the time. Look at this.
How did you get the emails? I don't know. But it's really interesting that this guy actually used the Samsung.
Subject, why I just dumped the iPad. Hint, size matters. Having used a Samsung Galaxy, I agree with many of the comments below. I believe there will be a 7-inch market, and we should do one. And so, alongside the next generation iPad 4, which, yes, came out the same year as the iPad 3, new iPad, Apple also released the iPad mini. And to be completely honest, I don't think it was all that exciting. Apple had clearly decided.
That's pretty big for a 7-inch tablet, at least in terms of aspect ratio. Like, 7-inch tablets you could probably fit in your pocket. Like, I mean, if you think about it, this is 6.8 inches. So if the case is probably 6.7 inches. I think and of course it does fit in my pocket.
Decided that the kind of user who'd be looking for a mini tablet wasn't someone who would care about the cutting edge. So the iPad mini is basically just a tiny iPad 2 in terms of specs, and it came out at $329. The cool part though is that yes, even though this was just an iPad 2 on the inside, the thinner display technology available now and the new unibody outer shell, which had fewer parts, meant that instead of the iPad mini being thicker than the iPad 2, like you would expect given that it's shorter and narrower, it's actually thinner too. This thing is just 7.2 millimeters thin, much thinner than Apple's competitors at the time.
I tested out that game. I'm sure it was decent back in 2013. Physics was hard, on phones. So boring.
Like the Google Nexus 7 and the Amazon Fire HD, the former being arguably the first major Android tablet success story. And for the market they were targeting, this was absolutely the right thing to focus on. It meant that this technically inferior iPad mini actually far outsold the iPad 4 that it released alongside. Supply chain numbers suggest that Apple was restocking this thing at 2 times the rate, which you could sort of see coming from the moment the iPad mini was first unveiled on stage. Oh yeah, this is also where Apple introduced the Lightning port to the iPad, which in one sense felt like the future.
Interesting too.
It could support higher transfer speeds, faster charging, it was way neater and less bulky, and unlike the industry standard micro USB at the time, completely reversible.
Did you see that, guys? Without having the DOJ or the European Union step in and choose what kind of ports. Apple decided to make the switch all by themselves, almost like Apple uh, has a choice in what they do.
But on the other hand, users and reviewers weren't completely jazzed that Apple had gone from one self-made proprietary cable straight to another, making the old cable obsolete and requiring a whole new set of accessories. Oh, unless you pick up.
I wonder how you can make your own port though. Like, how those ports do get made. We don't really hear much about it.
The $30 adapter. But the 4th gen full-size iPad was still the true flagship of 2012. And since Apple attributed a lot of the iPad's success so far to its pricing, they kept it again. For the 4th year in a row, this was $499. Even though when you factor in inflation, that's actually about 20% cheaper than the first model. Also a lightning cable here, and the machine itself. Which actually sparked quite a bit of drama from people who just bought the previous gen, only to have this thing drop 7 months later. Feels particularly cruel given the naming on that iPad. This was a massive chipset upgrade from the A5X to the A6X, which made this about 2.5 times more powerful than the iPad 3.
I wonder what month it released. Maybe it was like for Christmas or something.
And so about 6.5 times more powerful than the original iPad. But apart from that, and upgrading the front camera from 0.3 to 1.2 megapixel, there is basically nothing new. It's literally iPad 3. Maybe they should have just called this the newer iPad. Do you know what they actually called it? iPad 4 was officially sold under the name iPad with Retina display, even though they just previously released the iPad with Retina display. So you took
That's crazy.
the old feature from the new iPad, that's really now the old iPad, and used it to name the actually new iPad. Apple, what are you doing?
They need to fire their marketing staff or something. There's no way Apple would name the next iPhone with Retina display.
I think it's pretty clear that Apple themselves were confused with what to do with iPad. You could tell that all of this was not one person calling the shots, but a divided boardroom. And if anything reinforces that idea, is the fact that the following year, instead of a 5th generation iPad, Apple instead released yet another new category, the iPad Air.
What's your favorite category of iPad, by the way? I think the Mini, if they added cellular capability, would kind of like wipe out some of the iPhone's competition. It's like you can give that to a kid. It's big. It's actually cheaper than most iPhones, instead of like the SE, which isn't. Come on.
I remember seeing this thing get announced on stage. Apple called this the biggest step yet in achieving the vision of the iPad, and the crowd seemed pretty happy about it. Now, obviously, to invent a whole new name for this iPad, it must be a lot thinner and lighter, right? Well, yes, actually. The very first iPad was 680 grams. The most recent iPad 4 was 652 grams. The iPad Air was just 469.
Also looks a lot narrower as well. And also, looking at them side by side, yes, the icons do look a lot better on the Air.
And making that much of a change to what was already a very optimized design, that requires a lot of work. Apple had to eliminate the air gap between the front glass and the
This reminds me of saying 2015, 2016-esque trends. Not really because, I was doing the trends or anything like that, but because I can go back in time, read about them.
LCD panel, which also at the same time improves the picture quality.
Also, that's like the default, wallpaper and icons they have in all the technology magazines. Hey guys, iPhone 7, iPhone 6.
Aluminium frame was slimmer, and these smaller size bezels, they were not just an aesthetic win, but also meant that you need less material. But the thing that made the most difference? Apple shrunk the battery by a good 30%, but still managed to keep the same end battery life through a pretty massive leap in efficiency with their new A7.
With the A7 chip. Right, that's really interesting with the A7 chip, how they're able to improve the battery life here. And you can see here, as they're kind of tapering off, like we're not really seeing any new huge leaps in terms of processing applications. I guess it's now going to the battery thing. Of course, for phones, you would have seen huge leaps in terms of camera. This is an iPad, so it doesn't really matter. Like they've already had the display, which you can't see any pixels in it. You already have your facelift. So now what? What's next? You're going to see that and you're going to see a whole bunch of problems start to crop up now. And that's what's happening with the smartphone market of today. Like, yes, we see the new specs, but do we see any new applications coming alongside it? No, we don't. And if we do see new applications, they're just web applications. Like, oh, guys, we can run ChatGPT on a phone. Big whoop. Someone got Claude to work on some iOS phone, because Claude is basically just a client that accesses the web browser. So as long as you have a half decent web browser, you can use Claude in any of the AI applications you want to use, because it's not processing client side, it's processing server side.
7 chip that also happened to double the performance of the last iPad. These numbers are really, really impressive. And so even though this might look just like an upsized iPad mini, it's the power and the branding of iPad Air that I think was a big part of the thing's success. I think Air just makes it feel very clearly new. You felt like you were buying something that was distinctly impossible the last year. But I think the most interesting part of this is that the iPad
I like
Air
that bottom thing. It kind of reminds me of an iPod.
Launched with iOS 7, the first ever major iOS redesign. And on one hand, this just feels right. Apple's lightest iPad releasing alongside their lightest feeling software. iOS 7 got rid of all complicated 3D shapes and replaced them with nearly shadowless flat icons, thinner text, and plainer backgrounds. I remember my friends showing me the new iOS in the playground and it distinctly feeling like the future. This flat design was what the entire industry was moving towards at the time. But when I look back, I also can't help but feel like the original iOS icons had so much more charm. iOS 7 also does feel a bit characterless by comparison, but this is where things get
I do
taken
like
up
the Notes
another
application over there.
notch, because in all this time making iPads, there's one thing that Apple hadn't tried yet. We've had iPad but small, we've had iPad but thin, and in 2015, Apple decided it was time for iPad but big.
And in 2015, of course, that doesn't really make that much sense, because you didn't have those pro applications coming out to the iPad. Like, I guess it's the resurgence of 1980s, 1990s style portable TVs where you can watch Netflix or whatever. But I mean, you can watch Netflix on a phone, and like 4.7, if you have an Android phone, 6 inches is good enough to watch Netflix. It's good enough for whatever movie you want to watch, especially when you want to watch full screen or whatever, in my opinion.
And not just in size. This is the absolutely ginormous iPad Pro, the big daddy of iPads. I could not for the life of me find one of these brand new, by the way, so this one is used, but barely. Now, credit where credit's due. I actually think it's pretty great that Apple managed to, at first, release the iPad at $499 and then keep hitting that price year after year while making the product significantly better. That said, Pro is where the company makes up for that lost ground, with a starting price of $7.
I mean, look at that, $799 for 32 gigabytes, which is another thing that, we've been talking about how smartphones improved over time. Storage was important. I think an interesting thing that we're seeing now is, back then, of course, streaming wasn't really that big of a thing in 2007, 2010, right? So having double the storage on your phone literally meant you could have double the songs, double the apps, double the games, double the videos. But now, since streaming is a huge thing, but we have, terabyte level phones, unless you're filling up lots of pictures, lots of videos that you take yourself, you're not downloading movies. You're using Netflix or whatever your favorite streaming app is. Downloading music. I mean, it's kind of hard to find places where you can download music as an MP3 now legally. Those don't really exist as much. I think iTunes is still up, right? But you're not downloading as much stuff as you're streaming more things. So it's kind of weird. Like, you could probably get by if you don't take lots of pictures and videos on 64 gigabytes. Well, OS got bigger, but if you don't use that many applications, which I kind of don't. Like, I would need more storage, because you have to save all the pictures of Ava, save all the clips that I make on my phone, because it's easier to edit on the computer and things of that nature. But if you're like just an average consumer, and your favorite applications, of course, you have Spotify, YouTube, then you probably can get by on 64 gigabytes of storage now. But back then, if you did all the same things, you might want 128 because of the songs and videos, movies that you download.
$199. So this needs to be a massive improvement. And, well, you got a new chip, the A9X, which is a very healthy 1.9x improvement over the previous AA techs that Apple used in the iPad Air 2.
Notice he didn't open the iPad Air 2, so he didn't buy every iPad ever.
and an enormous 3.4x jump over the A7 in the original iPad Air. But at the same time, if the iPad Airs are getting these super high performance X series chips, then what's actually pro about the iPad Pro? Well, it's massive. This 12.9-inch display is practically laptop-sized. We now have a quad speaker setup, which, actually, let's do a quick demo. So this is the iPad Air.
Whether you're a GP, pediatrics, psych, or anything else, Heidi's Scribe helps you get more out of...
There we go.
It's actually pretty good, although highly directional considering that the speakers both face downwards. And then with the iPad Pro, we move from 2 to 4 speakers, and they are all around the device.
Better.
It's not that much louder, but it's way more immersive. There's a camera upgrade to 8 megapixel, which I'm sure is exactly what the pros were pining for, and the introduction of this, the Apple Pencil, which is particularly interesting because styluses are something that Steve Jobs used to hate.
You have to get them and put them away and you lose them. Yuck.
Plus, does it not feel like the entire existence of the iPad Pro was something Steve Jobs would have questioned? The way that he saw the world was big old PC computers were like trucks. There'd always be some people who need them, but that's a minority.
Yeah, that's what's happening now, which is unfortunate.
Majority of people will use cars. And in this analogy, Jobs saw the iPad as the car. And so in a way, this iPad Pro makes a lot of sense. Of course, you'll have some people who don't want a truck, but do want a more souped up pro car. But then, isn't that what the MacBook is for? And you're about to see...
Wait, they're not counting the MacBook as a car? I mean, as a PC?
The relationship between these two products get more and more murky. Also, I find this so cool. Let's say you're finding your existing wallpaper a little bit too bland. If I pull up the Opera browser, our sponsor, make me an iPad wallpaper in this style, but more colorful. Why I gravitate towards Opera? Because tab islands let you stay completely.
Come on. Well, we're gonna wait for the, it to load so we don't have to see this sponsored advert. Today would be a good day, so let's pause it.
The iPad itself, which has not just a new design, but equally as exciting, a new matte packaging.
And notice the new port, I guess you can say. Here, I think that's for keyboards. Keyboard test.
Extra crispy. Now, I have to say, I noticed a change in Apple around this time. Partly, I think, because iPad market share was falling, hitting just 24% in 2015 because of more competition from Samsung and Lenovo.
Oh yeah, Samsung tablets were good. I had a Samsung Galaxy Tab S3. I returned it. Partly because I couldn't get Windows to run on it, which is unfortunate because I needed that for the phone hacking software, and because it stopped charging. So that was important. But the Tab S3, it was great. It had a nice big screen. I didn't have a phone back then. It had a nice big screen. It came on apps. Yeah, it came with the stylus in the box. I didn't buy a keyboard for it, so that was sad. Oh, and of course, it could take pictures. I tried to get Bixby to run on it. I wanted face recognition, but Tab S4 was too expensive. I was really interested in Samsung Tab and Samsung technology, like super a lot back then. Like this is like 2019. It had the fingerprint scanner, so it was a good tablet. For like all of 1 week, but then I replaced it for Samsung tablet Windows. That ran Windows.
And iPhones now being offered in larger phablet sizes. And partly because this is where Apple's mobile A-series chipsets started to get really fast. Put these two things together, and this is where you notice Apple starting to go straight for the computer users. Right from the very launch event of the iPad Pro 3, they touted how the new A12X Bionic processor was faster than 92% of portable PCs, with overall system performance 2.8 times faster.
Whoa! What happened to the Pro 2? Did he not review it? Did they skip 2? I know in China they skipped 4. Not Apple, but like Xiaomi, Chinese companies.
Faster than the Gen 1 iPad Pro, making it around 124 times faster than the very first iPad and 421 times faster than the first iPhone. Not to mention, this was the first iPad with a USB-C port. And
again, without having the EU or DOJ telling them.
The EU didn't even need to tell them to do it. This was clearly part of the new Apple strategy, where the iPad was pitched as a great alternative to a Windows computer, with this port allowing it to be hooked up to a 5K resolution monitor, as well as giving it compatibility with a whole bunch of Pro accessories.
You can see the applications are finally catching up to the software that they have too. Like, if you a great computer without any applications is useless.
Storage capacity was now up to 1 terabyte. This is the first iPad with Face ID, so out with the home button. We got a 120Hz ProMotion display.
And well, the arrows kept the home button. People like that for the.
And also, just generally, this is just such a nice neatening and sharpening up of the way that iPad looks. It feels way more intentional now. But the main reason this iPad was
kind of looks like the iPhone 8. Which was kind of, like, it's kind of one of the forgotten phones of history.
Such big news for me, a massive reduction, and just as important, evening of the bezels around the screen. This moved the iPad from tablet to magic sheet of glass, as Apple calls it, because you can use it just as easily from every angle. And you know what? This new Windows laptop targeting strategy was actually kind of working. Apple's market share started to pick up once again. So they kept doubling.
And people even did that, even with the iPad Pro original from 2015, even with some of the bigger iPads, 9.7 inches in like 2013. You can see people like saying, "Oh, I tried to be a blog or news editor article using iPad for a day, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. It's not that hard." I mean, I ran my entire blog for cell phone for 1 week.
Down on this mantra with the iPad Pro 4 in 2020.
Just reminds you of like iPhone 11 camera bump.
How to get the most of Grammarly free.
It's Kayla on behalf of Grammarly to tell
These
you all
iPads
about
are
the
giving
free
such. They look like creators like would use these type of things, like I guess Instagram or TikTok stars, or maybe people at church. I don't know.
Your next computer is not a computer, they said. It came with massively upgraded cameras, a new LiDAR sensor, which in hindsight was...
They probably should have launched an app. I think they had a measuring application, but now it can do like 3D modeling and mapping. So that's interesting.
Quite a few years too early to be of much use to any consumer. And then the A12Z Bionic chipset. God, Apple, please stick to one naming convention, I'm begging you. And it made basically no difference to performance. One pretty large development was the new Magic Keyboard.
I mean, look at the applications you see here. You guys got Google, YouTube, Pocket, Safari, Gmail, settings, and news. It's just kind of sad for level of applications that you have here. Pathetic, honestly. And also, you can notice here. Now, notice the applications here that are not pre-installed. Google. These people here, MKBC, went purposely out of his way to download Google. He could have downloaded Bing. He could have downloaded whatever search engine he wanted to. But no, he decided to use Google because it's the best.
Board you could get with it, which also included a trackpad. You sure it's not a computer, Tim? But this was especially strange since the selfie camera which you'd be using for calls was still on the top edge, which made no sense since Apple were clearly trying to push you to use the device horizontally. The biggest change, though, between the last iPad and this one is the iPad's second big software overhaul, iPadOS. It's hard to believe, but up until this point, every iPad was just running the same iOS that iPhones were running. But in order to target their appeal to computer users, Apple had to convince them that they were getting more than just what their phones already could do. So, iPadOS...
I guess they're convinced that it's really weird to see Apple showing off at an Apple conference that it has Word. That's weird, but okay. Anyway, it's really interesting to see the computers. It's like basically a phone with a keyboard on it. That's what people are using computers for. It's just, hey guys, we have a browser and a stick. That's basically what computers are now. Really sad.
Launched with a redesigned home screen that could fit more apps. Long overdue, but it did fix the frankly ridiculous-looking spacing that iPads had up until this point. There's new widgets. Safari would now also automatically give you the desktop version of sites, scaled for the iPad display and optimized for touch. It wasn't immediately a massive change, but it needed to happen eventually, since the way people use their phones is very different to the way they use their tablets. Before long...
Not really. At least not people I know.
Apple's market share was back up to 38%, helped in part thanks to a growing middle class in emerging markets who could actually afford their premium product. At which point Apple decided, you know what? It's time for another price hike. $1,099 was what the 20.
It's a lot of money when you could get, a Windows laptop that should hypothetically, of course, if you can't find the applications, it doesn't, but should hypothetically do a lot more than the iPad itself does.
2021 iPad Pro 5th gen launched at, and to well and truly solidify that not a computer but basically a computer was the direction that Apple wanted to go in, this time around, Apple actually managed to squeeze in the M1 laptop grade chip inside of the iPad.
Which is insane, and they go through like all the M chips, but of course, they basically have the same applications that you have now. And speaking of cloud computing, cloud applications, hopefully you guys can see this on the screen, but the Windows 365 PC, it's ridiculous. Okay, imagine this. Microsoft has released a Windows 365, which is their cloud PC, but they released a desktop mini PC for it. Unfortunately, the computer needs to be connected to the internet at all times. If it doesn't work, because it doesn't actually run Windows on the device and have like bad spec Windows or something, it runs like some weird kernel of Windows. And people were talking about it over on Windows Central, but I can pull up the article. We go, Windows Central. It is this mini PC, kind of like the Mac Mini, but the Mac Mini, if it was in the cloud. Oh, I can't find it. I always get all these deals that they have here, which is, I don't know how these people stay in business. They just have these deals. Okay, let me see. Let's go to Windows. I'm over on Windows Central. Maybe it's Windows Mag. Windows Mag. All right. It's loading. Oh, Windows Mag doesn't exist anymore. I'm going to find the Microsoft Cloud Mini PC. Ugh, not Microsoft. All right, let's see if I can find it. There we go. Windows 365 link. All right, hopefully you guys can see this on the screen, but this is the Microsoft 365 link. Laptop Max is the power button in the right place, which is kind of funny. But Microsoft Cloud PC 365 link has a power button on the front, whatever. It relies on the remote servers from Microsoft to be online all the time working, which, given the Microsoft Cloud flight game simulator fiasco, might not always be a thing. Like, why would you buy a PC that costs $200 and then pay $30 a month to access it, and you have to keep paying, or it is a very expensive doorstop? Like, you could buy, and it is more powerful. It is powerful enough to export to another monitor, which people are obsessed with. Like, oh guys, I need another monitor, which is ridiculous. Like, all you have open is web browser tabs and Excel spreadsheets. You'll be fine. Anyway. Anyway, this thing costs so much money. And you have to keep paying for it. $300, and then you have to keep paying for it. It's a cloud PC. And it's a cloud PC that works on any other PC. So I guess you just want to buy it so it has good desktop things. Maybe it can get hacked. not hacked as in people hack in and steal your data. I mean hacked as in like hack to like do something useful. But it's gonna have some type of Intel processor, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and only 64 gigabytes of storage. But I mean, at this point, you might as well just have a phone that runs Samsung Dex. Use Cloud PC, plug it in, use your Dex interface, and have a nice big screen so you can use a good browser or something. It's crazy. And people are saying, oh, well, cloud PCs. I mean, look at the sign in, too. Very minimalistic. People are like, oh, well, cloud PCs, they're the future unless you want a game or something, which is really sad that we've kind of relegated computers to browsing and gaming. Really sad, especially since, they're all requiring the internet now, which is sad because in the 80s and the 90s, people actually made software that didn't require the internet because, it was slow. So it's kind of like we've regressed. Yeah, anyway, one last thing to talk about. Come on, open. There's this movie series over on Tubi. I recommend that you go watch it. It's called, what's it called? Agent Cody Banks and Agent Cody Banks 2, Destination London. Agent Cody Banks is a teenage spy for the CIA. The movie's rated, let me mute it so I don't get copyright stricken PG. But the synopsis of the movie is he has to go in and date some kid in some private school to protect him from a father, but apparently his father's not evil. He kind of like coerced into things. However, there are a few plot holes in the movie. First of all, he is so very obvious. Like, he almost blows his cover multiple times. In fact, his handler comes into the school, walks in, kind of like beats up 7 boys, and then drags him out. And no one wonders, like, who this random lady is that walks in and drags Cody Banks in. Second of all, the entire plot, like the data to get access to parties so you can get blah 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 blah, just like be competent. He's halfway incompetent. The only reason he's able to get invited to a birthday party is because he saves him from falling. But while at the party, he like basically beats up 4 people and pushes them into a pool, which causes the very obvious agents to see that, yes, he is a spy that works for the CIA. And, they say that the state of the free world was at stake. But honestly, the reward that he gets getting a driver's license to that kid, I think the free world was at more stake allowing that kid to drive than it was before having the nanobots? Yeah, nanobots. Nanobots take over and infest the world. So, that's my take on the movie. Also, it does not disprove the SSA LTW Act of Teenage Threat to National Security. So, don't get any ideas, because when he tries to rescue her and he tells the truth, she does get upset until she realizes that the place is burning to the ground and she needs to get out. So. On to one last thing. To the people that when I call out an actual legitimate Zen over on that would be a Zen over on GQ, Got Questions, greatest website. And then you guys go tech Ava, which wouldn't be a Zen. We checked with Got Questions, and it's faster. 2 filters. Get lives. Honestly, that's the best oh wow. See, this kid called out something that's objectively wrong according to GQ. But because he has something that's according to GQ a gray area, then we'll go all in and attack him here, because we suck at arguments. Anyway, I'm pretty sure I forgot something and I'll remember it later. But we'll talk about that on the next podcast episode when there's some blowing things going on outside. God bless Tech Talk today, and hopefully they'll make some new technology, new applications that we can learn and enjoy and test out together. Maybe it'll send me some stuff to review. I haven't got any major things to review as well. So getting some new review technology should be fun. Reviewing things is a passion, really. And hopefully they don't break up Chrome and Google, because that'd be really sad. So God bless, and Tech Talk to you later. Whoa, wait, we're still live.